Okay, now we need to start talking about the statistical application project. Okay, so to start, let's go ahead and go to Files, and I updated the syllabus. So let's take a look at the syllabus. So you'll now see that week 6, you're going to have variable and analysis approval, okay? And then week 8, the actual project is due and there's going to be a presentation. Okay, so what I'm considering doing for the presentation is I'm going to go ahead and send around a doodle poll, and you're going to be able to indicate your availability. So I'm hoping sometime during week 8, everyone will be available to present, and we'll do a Google Hangout. And each presentation should be no more than like 3 minutes, and I believe there's 12 people in the class. So it should go pretty quick. I'll set up the meeting for like an hour. Okay. So what is this project? Well, first of all, don't be intimidated by it. It's really not that hard. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an expert statistician, but literally it's not that hard. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to pick 2 variables and you need to examine the relationship between these 2 variables. Okay, and how are you doing that? Well, you start off by coming up with a hypothesis. So what is this going to look like? Well, let's go back to Canvas and let me show you where you're getting your data. Okay, so if you're under Files and you go to Statistical Application Project, it might not let you do it. Okay, so that's okay. Sometimes Canvas doesn't work well. Okay, here you go. So project data. So we're going to be using the same SPSS data that we're using for our SPSS lectures and activities. Okay, so that's this data right here. One thing I attached to kind of help you visualize your project, or rather the 2 variables you're going to pick, is I attached the survey instrument that was used to collect these SPSS data. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so essentially, participants answered the survey, turned in the survey. Okay, I gave the surveys to my research assistants, who then entered all these participants' data in SPSS so that we can do the analyses. So let's go ahead and look at the survey instrument. Okay. So the study was called Personality and Gay Marriage Attitudes. And here you go. So it's an official study. And you'll see here are all the variables that participants responded to, and now these variables are located in SPSS. So when you choose 2 variables, it could be any of these. So for example, and this is the PowerPoint, the example PowerPoint that I posted on Canvas. I chose to examine the relationship between political orientation and the public display of the 10 Commandments. So let me go over how I figured this out. Okay. So I was looking at this survey and I was like, okay, well, I'm interested in political orientation. So this is in the SPSS file. So if someone indicated a 1 in political orientation, it would mean that they're extremely liberal. If they indicated a 9, it would mean they're extremely conservative. Okay, cool. And I wanted to pick one of these support variables. So I picked public display of the 10 Commandments. So if someone scores 1 in public display of the 10 Commandments, that means they're strongly against it. And if they score 5, it means they strongly support it. right? So higher numbers mean stronger support for the public display of the Ten Commandments. Lower numbers mean more against the public display of the Ten Commandments. And then going to political orientation, okay, lower political orientation means more liberal. Higher political orientation means more conservative. Okay, so then what I did is I went to SPSS and I said, okay, well, let's find these variables. So I believe, here you go, political orientation. And here we're looking at the values. Exactly, it maps on, right? 1 is extremely liberal, 9 is extremely conservative. So I have Y, political orientation. And then support 9 is the public display of the Ten Commandments. So 1 is strongly against, 5 strongly support. Okay, so notice you have your variable names and then you have your labels. So essentially the labels are more or less the questions that were asked on the actual survey. So that's going to help you out a bit. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Let me tell you how this played out. So once I chose my variables, right, and that's the first thing you have to do. You have to look at the survey in SPSS and choose the variables that you want to examine the relationship between. Here you go. You can make your title page, right? I just said, well, I'm examining the relationship between political orientation and the public display of the Ten Commandments. Okay. So once I picked my variables, I had to come up with a hypothesis, or rather a prediction. So I predicted people who are more conservative will tend to support the public display of the Ten Commandments more than people who are more liberal. So once you come up with your hypothesis, then you have to write your rationale, okay? In this case, my rationale was a little more complicated because I ran some subsequent analyses, but your rationale could literally be anything. So I could have said, well, just based on my experiences, I have found that conservatives tend to support things like public display of the Ten Commandments more than liberals, okay? Passion, so I wrote for my passion. You can write whatever you want. I've been interested in political, it actually says I've been interested in politics since and because of the 2000 presidential election. Having the ability to predict and understand the differences between conservatives and liberals based on actual data is not only interesting, but important. Okay. So this is basically as far as you need to get for week 6, okay? The variable and analysis approval. So I want you to pick 2 variables using the survey in the SPSS file. I want you to create a title page that says, literally, you're examining the relationship between 2 variables. So it's going to say the relationship between political orientation and public display of the Ten Commandments. Okay. If you want to come up with a more flashy title that makes sense based on the data, you can, but I might not approve it, so we'll see. Okay, so title page, hypothesis, rationale, and passion. Okay, and then I want you to turn in a 5th slide this week. Okay, you could either run the analysis in SPSS or you can write what you're going to do. So for example, what I decided here, and this is what I'm going to encourage you all to do, is to literally find 2 variables that you want to examine the relationship between. And what does that mean? It means you're going to calculate a sample correlation, and then you're going to do t-test to test the difference between row and 0. Okay. So if that's what you're doing, that's what your slide 5 is going to tell me. It is possible, though, that you're going to do a different analysis, right? Independent samples t-test, one-way ANOVA, the sky's the limit. You have to do some sort of inferential statistic. But I'm going to recommend just calculating a sample correlation and doing t-test to test the difference between row and 0. Okay? So once again, what you're expected to turn in, week 6, okay? A title representing the 2 variables that you're examining the relationship between. or hypothesis, rationale, passion, and either the analysis done or you noting the fact, for example, that you're going to calculate a sample correlation and then do t-test to test the difference between rho and 0. So for the final project due week 8, you're going to have to edit anything that needs editing based on my recommendations. You're going to have to actually do your analysis. Okay, so here I did my analysis, right? And then if you're calculating a sample correlation, you have to interpret the sample correlation just like we did in class. And then you have to do t-test to test the difference between rho and 0. You have to include the null and alternative hypotheses. And then p is less than or greater than 0.05. Reject the null hypothesis. So let's go back to the syllabus. So by week 6, okay, you're going to get 10 points, okay? When you submit it and then I approve your variables and your analysis, okay? So final project, you're going to get 5 points for your hypothesis, 5 points for your rationale, 5 points for your passion, 10 points for presenting these during the day of the presentation. And then you're going to have to do your analysis done using SPSS. Really, just do it like I did it, unless you're doing like an independent samples t-test or ANOVA, and it's going to be a little different. And then full interpretation, then you get points for presenting. So that's the statistical application project. Like I said, it's not that difficult. That being said, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and I will answer any and all questions. Have a nice day.